Hello, welcome to the special presentation we hold today in the frames of StopTrik International Film Festival. It is a very unique opportunity we hope to go through together. We will talk, this presentation regards is one of the most difficult conversation that can be ongoing in the art communities, in the conversation that regards definitions, measurements, and changes in regard to inappropriate behavior patterns in art academies. We have special guest presenter with us, Professor Mikołaj Lewicki from the University of Warsaw, who was co-leader of the research group that, to our best knowledge, was the first ever research group, at least in Europe, to be invited by the Arts Academy in order to engage with the Arts Academy community on this difficult path of understanding the problems and creating a roadmap of getting out of them. We organized this event in cooperation with Keep Festive. That is an initiative of European Film initiative of art house animation film festivals dedicated to improvement of safety at festivals, schools, and among animation community. So we thank you, Keep Festive. This presentation, this seminar is recorded. Is being recorded right now. It will be published online and available for a wide public. Please let me introduce Professor Lewicki, and of course, we will start. You will start. So, Professor Mikołaj Lewicki works at the Department of Sociology, University of Warsaw. His main areas of interest concern economic sociology, organizational culture, cultural institutions, and cultural practices. Recently published books: "The Future Cannot Begin: Polish Transformation Discourses According to Theories of Time and Theories of Modernization," "The Social Life of Mortgage," and he co-authored "Culture on Peripheries." He's also the founder of New Community Foundation, focusing on depolarization and dialogue among conflicting communities. So I believe it is a perfect background to provide this research. Of course, after the presentation, the floor will be open for the questions.
Yeah, so let me start with the two personal remarks. One is that I know that for the recording, this is probably the best setting, but for the discussion, it's less comfortable. So because it creates a barrier between us. So, but I assume that my presentation is more into discussion than into a lecture. So please just write the notes and feel free to ask anything about the research or discuss the topics that will be dealt with. And another personal remark is that actually I've been, throughout my research experience, I've been involved in many diagnoses and projects that were involving cultural sector or public institutions. And I've never experienced so much engagement and so much involvement and maturity from this on the side of the institution that I was working with. In order to receive the information from the research and compose it into a longer and more complex process that involves a lot of institutional changes. And I treat it as I thought it could be interesting for the community that you're working with and you're studying in, since some problems are common to all higher education. Some are very specific to theatrical and art schools. And I'm just wondering to what extent you find yourself in this whole story. My point is that this picture of the academy that you will get is not the picture that is full and complex. It is a picture that focuses on negative, on bad experiences that are going around in these institutions. When I say that the academy is mature, I think it is very mature to make it public, to go into a research that then would be published and discussed first among the community and then just in a broader context. So this is an inauguration of this report going abroad and going internationally. Although internationally it has been discussed on the series of conferences Change Now, organized by a few art schools, theatrical schools among Europe. So thanks a lot for the organizer of thanks to the organizers that I was invited. I think it is important to speak about something that is tangible, that was already researched. We can discuss how this research was made, but at least it's a good starting point to do it. I will be speaking about the background of this study, then I'll tell you what are the outcomes, and we'll show you this longer or more complex process that this research is composed into. So the background is that throughout the last 3 years, perhaps even more, but at least since 2019, we had a lot of call-outs among former students, among the community, artistic community in Poland, and among the students of artistic schools. These are two quotes that are long, but I think they are worth of citing, because later on I'm going to speak more abstractly about the structure, organization, measurements, etc., etc. Here you've got something, the gist of the whole story, right? So let me read it. It's a part of a call-out that was the most famous one of Anna Paliga, student of Łódź Film School. She went publicly and gave very specific, concrete examples of what we are talking about when we are talking about the violence and discrimination in the theatrical or artistic schools. Diploma, 4th year, Professor PhD Mariusz Grzegorek, director of our school, while working on the diploma, became furious many times, almost every day during the rehearsals, and called me a fucking slut whore. He humiliated both me and my colleagues in front of the entire group and technical staff. The slightest mistake sent him into a state of unstoppable verbal aggression, intensified by the pre-premiere stress. Vice Rector Michał Staszczak learned about everything in detail from me. I heard that I can't grit my teeth, but I should, and that I'm too soft for this profession. It ended with a nervous breakdown, anti-anxiety pills, and long-term therapy. Another excerpt from a testimony of a pretty famous young Polish actor. I did it, or rather, I did what was best for me and left the theater academy in Warsaw after the first semester. During this short time, I witnessed many situations of humiliation, harassment, and even molestation of students. I felt that with each week and month spent in these institutions, I was closing myself off more, becoming more anxious, withdrawn, and terrified. I developed a severe eating disorder. I had anxiety, and I knew that I had to save myself, that mental health was more important than a diploma or completed studies, we read. So this is probably very well composed into a wave of Me Too call-outs and action initiative, but focuses on specific personalities among the community. Now, the Warsaw School was not part of this huge wave of call-outs, or was not playing as the main institutions that was focused into. There were some call-outs about the academy, but not the most famous ones. This is probably because also because theatrical academy started to deal with it a bit later, a bit earlier. So it was more prepared into such cases, into dealing with it, etc. So I will speak about it in a minute, but just a few basic facts. There are about 400 students in the academy. Most of them, or at least half of them, are the actors. The rest is divided mainly by three the departments or the directions. One is director direction or unit, then theater studies, and a branch of the school based in another city in Białystok that is focusing on puppet theater. So we've got directors, actors, and technicians in this branch. As I said, Academy is already working with it, and it still maintains or tries to be a sort of a leader in the dealing with the violence and discrimination among the theatrical schools in Poland. So mind the gap that we are speaking about the institution that is, in a way, the most progressive one. It has its own code of ethics. It has its students' ombudsman. It has procedures associated with the reporting of misuse, procedures that tells you what to do when you feel that the code of ethics is breached. And so after the call-outs, with the procedures, the school decided, the academy decided to make this research in order to actually find out what's the scale, what's the nature, what's the scale, and what's the impact of the potential violent and discriminatory behavior. Here we've got two excerpts of the code of ethics, which is interesting by itself, but this is also a part of our context, an important context to the research day, or to the outcome of the research they will be presenting. First is that it assumes that not only the victims are the ones who are supposed to report, and the second thing is that there are certain takes, as this first excerpt, that is probably something that would all agree to, that are quite obvious, right? But the practice shows that the reality is completely different, and there are many interpretations of these simple, so seemingly simple phrases that are put here. So we were supposed to first answer the question: can violence emerge in a community that is integrated by deep emotional involvement, constant co-presence, intense effort, and by master-apprentice relationships? And I think this is a question that could be addressed to almost all art school, regardless whether it focuses on actors and performative arts or in design or anything else. If so, how does violence occur? Does it include discrimination and sexual harassment? And what is important is that our sociological take was to see it as a part of an organization culture. So we were asking to what extent the violence and discriminatory behavior is stemming from how the institution is organized. Is it somehow is it as something that is more associated with specific person, with the exclusionary behavior, or is it a part of something that actually stimulates violence? And then, of course, something that we'll be discussing probably later on: does it actually mean to cross the boundaries in art, in performative arts? Basic facts about the research: we researched students and lecturers first in the qualitative research, so we actually spoke with them for hours. We had to, for example, make a special sort of therapeutic meetings among the researchers, because these were really hard moments when we were hearing the stories, when we observed people whining, etc., etc. First phase gave us the background, so we actually identified 30 very specific forms of violent behavior. And then we compose it into the quantitative research in order to know how is it common, to what extent is a big issue, in which behaviors are the most common ones, which are exclusionary, etc., etc. We made the recommendations, and right now we are in the process of consultations, discussions, and workshops. We were in the research we're taking into account non-binary categories such as gender. However, for example, in the quantitative research, the sample of people declaring non-binary identity was too small in order to publish it. So this is the drawbacks, for example, of such research. And important here is to understand that this research was not about investigating to identify perpetrators. So it was quite sure for everybody that this research would not be followed by any kind of suing without, testimony, etc., etc. It was a different thing than the procedures that were for the call-outs and for the dealing with the conflict. We knew that our research is a very specific one. Just imagine that I go and ask Folga or the other one, any other person right now. Yeah, I'm in a stage, right? I'm in a stage, so we can assume there's that it's probably preconceived, and it's like a stage and audience and everything is set up, right? In performative arts, you can say it's the same, right? So people are performing during the lecture, during their workshops, during their school lessons, and everything is in a way not only in a different setting, in a different sort of life. So we had to take this anthropological jobs in what context is also important. So starts with the fact that mostly the distance among lecturers and students is defaultly regulated. So lecturers are approaching students with the names, so they are shortening the distance. In Polish, this is something different when you say, Olga, come to me, than if you say, Miss Olga, please come to me, right? So the lecturers were actually dealing with it freely. To what extent are they supposed to speak directly by name? To what extent they should speak with Mr., Mrs.? For students, it was quite obvious that they are speaking about Miss and Mr. And let me again refer to my personal experience. I arrived some summer day in the school in order to talk with somebody. I was worn in a casual clothes. For me, of course, I don't see the age. So for me, I was quite similar to the others, and it wasn't obvious that I am a professor, that I am somebody. And immediately, I was approached with hello, good morning, etc. Something that is not obvious in the Warsaw University. So there's like immediate identification of relations among students. If you regulate the distance, then you are the one who are actually to set where is the distance and irony, and where is no irony and no distance. And this is this ambiguous case. I think that one of the most important takes from this report is that the source of the violence is the exhaustion and ethos of extreme efforts among the students of art schools. And I think I'm saying it provocatively, you can correct me, but I think in all art schools there's this ethos of extreme effort. So you work 24 hours, you stay in the school, etc., etc. This means that you reach exhaustion at a certain moment, and you lose the sense of what is right, what is wrong, what is permissible, what is not impermissible, etc., etc. The tricky thing is that it goes both to students and to lecturers. And this is something that was very important, that we figure out that the source of violence generated by lectures very often stems from the frustration that what are they proposing for the students is not working. At this stage, the natural propensity for them is to delegate the causality to the students. So they are the ones who are not, bringing the results. They are the ones who are guilty of something that is not going on, right? The question is how you deal with it. And here we've got two strategies or two ways of education that I will be ending up with this lecture. But before that, let me summarize the mechanism that reproduce violations. A part of the exhaustion, there is attitude to hierarchy. I already referred to it when I was speaking about addressing and regulating the distance. Normalization of violent behaviors. Well, you can say in an art school, throwing or shutting the door is something common. We are used to it. The thing is that if you refer to this slide, it demonstrates the effect, the final effect that we actually witnessed. Is that in the Warsaw Academy, there was not that many discrimination, violent behaviors that could be identified and associated with specific people, with specific lecturers or specific students. The thing is that when you take a student of the school, the load of those behaviors shown here. Remember, this is about at least 30 different kinds of behavior. Then his experience is like of a mobbed person. So there's no mobbing that would be defined as it is defined in the Code of Labor. There's no perpetrated systematic mobbing of one person towards the other. But if you take the student and his experience after one day, after 1 week, after 1 month of the studying, his behavior, his experience is like of a mobbed person. So, and I think I already addressed this issue of frustration of lecturers. If you are a lecturer and you have a community in which you are able to discuss it, then you're better off. If you have somebody, let's say your wife or your husband, to speak about this frustration that actually was generated during the exercises, that's fine. But the picture that we have is that lecturers are alone. They are rather lonely in terms of dealing with these all hard situation. So when we say about ambivalence, that is something that is before the violation of behavior. We are speaking about excessive personal critique instead of feedback. We are talking about discomfort, and we are talking about this transformative experience. And here you've got a testimony of a student who is talking how this transformation goes. Sociologists are saying this is something that is characteristic to total institutions. So that in a total institutions, you have to convert from the world outside to the world inside. And this is actually a take that basically addresses this issue. It does not mean that every student of a theatrical academy has to go through it, or that the whole academy is a total institution. It means that it has certain experiences, certain contexts, certain settings of lectures that produces this effect. Now, reaching boundaries is probably, we can discuss it, is probably the essence of the art, or transgression and transformation is something essential. What we witness are the two approaches to this reaching the boundaries. One is by conflict towards one's self-esteem and artistic expression. For example, among lecturers, we've got 3 attitudes towards violence. One is blindfulness towards violence. So lecturers are saying there is violence, but it's usually associated with these famous luminaries of our profession. They were hard, but they were reaching exceptional arts. So this is how these lecturers, these respondents of ours, are actually justifying the violence. When asked about the violence in their own behavior, they said there's no. They said there was no violence that I witnessed. There was no violence that I perpetuated, etc. The second attitude is very interesting one. It says there is violence. It is a problem, but actually it is to a certain extent associated with somebody personal's experience, personal borders. So we don't encourage. We should deal with it. But on the other hand, this is up for a person to decide and to set the border. So to a certain extent, violence is acceptable, is legitimate. It is very often intentionally generated by the process. And the third attitude is that violence is unacceptable. There should be consent, not only about the contract, about the so contract here could be meant formally at the beginning of the course or at the beginning of certain exercise. There's like a written or unwritten contract that certain behavior is inappropriate. But in a deeper sense, it's not about the contract in this sense, but in a sense of establishing common meaning. And this, I would refer to this take of frustration of lecturers. Some of them are just going out and they are basically pressing the students for the results. And some are they are sort of rewinding and saying, okay, it doesn't work. Let's talk. What's going on here? Why doesn't it work? What were my intentions? How did you perform it? How did you do it? Why didn't it work? So there are different ways of dealing with it. However, if you look at the declaration of students and of lecturers, because you could say, okay, this violence is also associated with the different meaning of violence. So what is violent, what is not violent? Whether approaching somebody or touching is always an act of violence. It could be seen differently by students and lecturers. This research shows that basically the definition is the same. If you take top 5 or top 3 behaviors that were declared as the most common ones or defined as violence, they are the same. Now, the final part of my presentation is about the change. So first of all, the perception of change. We were afraid that during the research and afterwards there would be a lot of unacceptance towards the change among the lecturers. That the research would brought up the issue of reluctance or even unacceptance of these changes that were going on in the academia and were associated with dealing with the violence. And we figured out that there is reluctance. There is a group of 45% of lecturers who are declaring that their perspective is not sufficiently present in the picture of the institution that deals with the violence and discrimination, but the level of unacceptance or the direction is rather accepted. So this is about perception. This is about the recommendations of our team. They were not addressing only the workshops or the language. They were also addressing such things as spatial organization, support of didactics, so support for the lectures, because we realized that they don't have actually a place and space to discuss the methods and the failures. And so this is one thing, but most importantly, the school decided to make workshops for students and lecturers on the coping with intimacy, on the reaching agreement, on building a new language, on building a new code of conduct that wouldn't be only based on the ethical code, but also in the practice. And actually, it led to serious tensions in the school. But probably I will speak about it afterwards, after the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful, fascinating lecture, and now we will make it less maybe hierarchical.
This is it. As I said, this is for me uncomfortable, but I understand that this is probably
this. We are recording, so is it okay now? Cool.
Yes, we need microphones and a little resetting, but it might be actually really better in this reorganization of space. Importantly, please use microphones when you want to ask questions, for the reason that we are recording it for publication. So your questions will not be heard by the future viewers, and they will lose content. So please, please wait with the questions for them.
Do you already have some questions? Okay.
Yeah. Hey. Thank you for the presentation. That's really interesting and really important research. But before we go to the main topic, I have a question about the methods. Can you explain more about it? I mean, the questionnaire, how many questions you had? It was a structure interview, or I think the translation from Polish is deep-in conversation. I mean, wywiady pogłębione, sorry. And about the students, how many of them was girl and boys? How many of them was from the first year and the other years? I really interested in details of this research.
So this is a more technical question, so let me address it. But if you want to have more, in the appendix of the research, there's like a methodological part that basically has everything that you ask for. Qualitative research was based on in-depth interviews. So we had structure, we had a couple of questions that were addressing the main issues that we wanted to address, but this was a sort of talk, a discussion. So it wasn't like I would ask a question and then somebody would be answering yes or no. He would be asked and would be developing his own language. And the whole idea of deep and interviews is to make a relationship between researcher and the respondent in order to base on his own language. So this was the moment that enabled us to transgress this border between the cultures. So we could, if we were using then these categories of violence, of violent behavior, these 30 categories, they were referring directly to the experiences and language that was used during the first step, during the qualitative research. It wasn't that we had definition of violence or we had definition of discrimination and were actually, in a way, expecting people to address these definitions. This first step was to stem with the definitions of the community. And then we had a quantitative research. Actually, both were very much into representativeness. So we had students of many grades, from the first to the fifth. We had male and female. We had different departments represented. What is interesting is that the school asked us about the research of the students. It was us to decide and actually to propose the academy to research among the lecturers. So we actually also had to figure out what would be actually representative for lecturers. That's why for example, we spoke also with in this first qualitative research, we spoke with the lecturers who are not employed at the academy, who are working on temporary contracts and who are not professional lecturers but rather practitioners. So we were trying to enlighten the organization from as many points as we could in terms of the sample. Of course, you could say. And this was interesting that in terms of percentage, there were more lecturers answering the quantitative research than the students, but still it's quite considerable sample that basically fulfills the sense of objectivity or representativeness of the research.
Thank you.
Thank you, first of all, for what I believe is a very important research topic. And I think it was very brave from the academy to start this journey in this way. I don't have high hopes that many academies will, even though perhaps it would be needed. I would be very interested in the takeaways for others. On one hand, both theater and film actors, but also other like art academies, and also in the continuation of this process at the academy itself. You write also about recommendation in terms of, I don't know, space organization. So I think, at least for my point of view, working at an academy, art, film academy, but we don't have like actors part, so we're not so much into this performative, but many other facets. Yeah, would be very interested in that. Takeaways and continuation.
I think this is a spontaneous reflection, but I think there's a need for networking between the schools, because I think Warsaw Academy is really progressive in a way how it approaches, how it deals with it, how long way it has already done in this direction, and I think the takeaways on institutional changes should stem from them. So they are to be addressed around it. Of course, we've got recommendations that are actually, I think, applicable also for art schools in general. For example, in terms of space, organization of space. As I said, there are these rooms or places that are supposed to be neutral, but they are somehow attached to certain departments or certain communities. I can imagine that in the art school, the painting department has its own corridors and the graphic department has its own corridors. And I'm wondering to what extent the people, transgressing, going, etc., are feeling the same in both corridors from different departments. The question, of course, I'm not suggesting that everywhere there's a conflict. I'm just putting on a table the case that where physically the space would be open, emotionally and socially it wouldn't be so open, right? So the question to institution is to what extent the community wants to reserve certain spaces and certain milieus as rather exclusive for certain people because they need it. But at the other hand, which spaces are supposed to be common? And as I said, in case of Warsaw Theatrical School, for example, students of theater studies, when they were at the corridors where the workshops and practical exercises of actor departments were taking, they were approached as too loud when they were speaking or doing something at the corridor. On the other hand, when students of actors were just, shouting and exercising at the corridor, when the theater studies were inside the classes, lecturers were opening the door and saying, keep quiet, and of course it didn't work. So this is, some things that basically mean that addressing violence is also addressing issues on the organization culture, and it's not only about the issue of violence. However, I think the procedures and the discussion only about the procedures is something that can be started with, right? So to what extent the ethical codes are working, to what extent the procedures of testifying, of calling in, of reporting the violence are working. It is a very complex process in which, for example, full transparency is probably not possible, right? So, and it has to take time. There is a time lag between the reporting and the final solution. The community the community knows about the reporting probably much faster and expects the outcome to be much faster than it can be delivered. So these issues that are probably very practical and organizational, I think, could be discussed in the communities.
In about to cheap and continues. That was count with other weights good. Okay. No, I wanted just to.
Hey, I was here. Hi, thanks very much. I was kind of hoping that the other people would put other questions because my comment is coming from a different angle. It's coming from the perspective of the lecturers. That's why I was very interested in the age that you had there, because myself and some other colleagues that I've been talking to in the last year, we've actually experienced the opposite, which is a kind of an approach from the students that comes embedded in this kind of, philosophy or approach that kind of preempts the dialogue that we may offer as a means to develop, in this case, animation projects, and starts to question the system or the identity of the tutor per se, because either we are, in this particular case, Europeans, white male, in this specific case, coming from a colonial country like Portugal. And so all that baggage suddenly is used against not just myself, but other colleagues. I'm thinking about England, and yesterday we were talking with Tal in Israel as well. And so I think you understand where I'm going. So it's very... I'm actually finding it difficult to express it, but, it's almost like this has become, for certain students, a kind of a weapon to prevent them to discuss the projects and rather not have a conflict with the institution in the old-fashioned sense like we talked about in the other day in a different debate, where there was always a natural, and I think it's very relevant in arts, that we question the professors and the authority of the masses and all that. But in this case, it's not that. It's something else that becomes personal and very, very vicious. And And I'm wondering, I think this is where I'm going, if you are thinking in opening this kind of research into that area, and not just as taking the students. This will sound horrible, I hope you understand, but I understand that especially maybe in a course like theatrical performance that is so physical, I understand that there may be more gestural behavior that impacts on the students, but in animation we don't have so much that, so that's definitely not a go area. But yeah, I'm
actually, when we discussed with Olga before we were discussing the presentation, we were actually thinking of discussing the question of censorship, because in a way it's about creating a cancel culture in which you cannot raise the voice when you're afraid, and you are actually the one to be responsible for a process, right? This is you cannot dismiss it, that there's a lecturer and he is in an asymmetrical situation when he has certain competencies and he needs to get people through a certain process. When they say you are just approaching my identity, it's in a way the way to not only to stop the process but to cancel it, because there's no place to speak about the rules, etc., etc. And I think this is a huge endangerment in this process. Is that it? And I don't think it addresses only art schools. It addresses also the communities and society. Is that the role and the identity are glued very strongly and more strongly in our institutions, and it's hard to speak about the roles and their rules without speaking about the identity. And somebody is referring to identity in a world in which we appreciate and evaluate diversity and minorities, etc. It's hard to speak about the roles and rules and contracts. But I think the way the academy is approaching it is that they try to focus on what they call contracting as a way in which something obligatory or some goal that should be there is that we should both go through the process of learning, through the process of making this workshop, through this exercise. It's something obligatory. We cannot stop it. Both sides are responsible. Then we have to set the rules. And if you say, I'm not going because you're the authority, then go ahead, speak about the rules. Speak about the contracts, speak about the conditions in which you want to work. The thing is that these perspectives are not meeting with each other very often, and I think this is about the master disciple, our master student relation or model that is also transforming. For the lectures of the Warsaw Academy, there is, for example, an insurmountable, a sort of objective code of conduct that is inherent for the craftsmanship. So we can discuss what's the interpretation of the piece, but we should assume that there is romantical drama. We should assume that there is comedy. We should assume that there's another form that needs to fulfill certain procedures. The only thing is that for students, very often, first of all, the canon is not that obvious. The second, they still need to relate certain so-called technical procedures with their sense of what's the meaning of these procedures. So for them, romantic dramaturgy is not that obvious as and its craftsmanship is not that obvious as for the lecturer. So this is a difference in the language that is transformed into the conflict, because the lecturer says, "I want just them to be crafted, to follow my craftsmanship." If we make workshops on romantic dramaturgy, they cannot say, now we're gonna get rid of romantic character, right, or something, because it would destroy the whole the whole convention, right? And this is something that that is quite challenging, because it means both sides have to step a bit before and discuss and then there is the question to what extent the workshop on romantic dramaturgy is connected with the classes on romanticism.
I did want to follow up, so I have another question.
Please remember your question then. So my follow-up really connect to this preparatory conversation we had, three of us, when we observed that indeed the new language, a new form of communication between students, lecturers is probably inevitable in a way, because the definitions, because of the differences of the definitions and the necessity to find some coherence in how this workshop on romanticism will be handled, because it has to be handled it has to be conducted in the schools. I think that one of the important takes I also had from the research was the observation that the students, their presence in academy is short term and very intense, and then the lecturers' presence in the academy is long-term, intense from time to time, and also mingled with frustration, of which you talked about. Hence, those definitions cannot meet easily, right? But in the end, these are lectures that are responsible for instigating, creating these new codes of communication, because this will be their tool for this long-term obligation they took upon themselves to be this academia, right? If I that's a comment, obviously not.
One more sentence. I don't think it's only a new language that is required. It's the discourse. That's a set of shared, agreed rules in order to have some sort of basic structure for the negotiations between agents.
I think this is probably quite obvious for sociologists, but probably not for not-sociologists. Is that when you start the question, when you start the change, the new language is seen as bureaucratized procedures and artificial. So the whole issue about contracting for older lectures, older is not only about the age in this sense. So this is rather a shortcoming, my shortcoming. This new language is about bureaucratization. So it means that every time I'm involved in certain process, I should stop and okay, now we take the table and we write down, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do, and it is not allowed to, etc., etc. For them, it seems to be stopping the creativity, the flow. But on the other hand, the question is the flow actually referring or addressing certain issues, right? So at the beginning, it seems that any change in the behavior or creating the new discourse can be seen as artificial, as bureaucratized, etc., etc. But it is, I think, up for the institution to somehow create its own code of conduct, its own behavior. And I'm not referring to something that is far away from my community. My community did not adjust and it did not adopt USOs, the way the system is working, right? And we did not work on creating a system that would actually omit the problem of parameterization. That would somehow create a system that would, for example, give more description of what people do and the outcome and less the grades, right? So every institution has this problem, right? If you treat these changes as something that is artificial, that is ideology, that is dominating the art world, and we cannot do anything but just to make it formal and we are going to work as we used to work informally, then it's a painstaking. It becomes a nuisance, right? If we start to discuss it, then probably there's a perspective and a way to somehow create a language that would address these changes.
Yeah, my question is actually about the language, because you said something about the sir, like Mr., Mrs., etc. And maybe, do you know if there is research on that, or maybe you have a personal opinion? Which is actually more healthy, like more, gives the best results? Like if we should shorten the distance, like as teachers or as students, calling each other by name, because I feel like it's fair if the both sides are on the same page, but maybe I assume you did some research on that, so.
I'm not researching it thoroughly, a part of this research, but I want to emphasize that the problem with it was that it was not consensual. So not both sides were supposed to shorten the distance. And this is the problem. If it's consent, so both sides say, okay, we're going to speak by names and not by forms, then it's fine. If the professor gives justifiable argument why students should use the term professor, Miss, Mrs., then I'm fine with it. I think both sides should just have the idea why we are using it.
So not very bureaucratic, so that's good.
But I think it changes very suddenly. I realized this year that I forgot, because I'm not used to, because I'm not accustomed as a lecturer to ask how should I address people in terms of gender, and then it was hard. If you don't do that, if you don't have this kind of new custom that you ask, then or in a way getting into your own trouble.
I don't think the students mind that if you are, open to asking again and respecting them.
Yes. Yes, but see, this is something that if you don't do it at the beginning, then the challenge is just growing.
Thank you.
Do you think the method still stand 100%? Well,
What? Others? Yeah, I really would love to know more about the results and the impact of your research in the academy, what happened after with all the results and the meetings with all the talk.
It is interesting. I should outline at the beginning that for us, for researchers, sociologists from the university, at certain moments it was shocking when we, for example, heard that this research, when we heard this testimony of a dean of the actor department, when she said, this research made my whole life, my whole lecture life nonsense. And when we hear such phrases, we are like, oh my God, what we did, right? But on the other hand, it is in a certain context of performance, etc., etc. So somehow your question is hard to answer because there's like what we hear and what we see and what's going on in the community. But what I take is I think still crucial is that this research was discussed among the students and lecturers for several rounds. So we had presentations of research, discussions around it. Then everybody could make comments, ask questions, etc., etc. Then it was the outcome of a research, as it is written in the intro by rector, was not in a way not illuminating. It wasn't something that the community would not know about it. It was rather confirming their intuitions or their diagnosis. So our research was a way to legitimize certain steps, such as making workshops obligatory for both sides, for students and for lecturers. Workshops were very hard to take among lecturers. Some of them were playing with it. Some of them were actually, performing during the lectures. Some during the workshops. Some workshops were broken because of the behavior of lecturers. So this is a process that is evolving emotions and conflicts. Definitely, it's not about just making and sort of scheduling the plans for workshops and just fulfilling it, right? I'm quite sure in the terms of the next year's rectors elections, the whole issue will be addressed. The discussion about the issue will be present. The question is what the institution does with it. The decision of the academy is to make meetings among the students that would be facilitated by people that are competent in facilitating the difficult discussions.
Plan that you accompany the change process, or are there other people now coming in to? So I think the research was not done just to have a survey. So I think there's a plan how to go on with the results. And are you still involved with this? And what happens with the study? Is it published?
Yeah. It is published broadly. I mean, it is living, and it's been discussed a bit in the media, but it is not discussed broadly among the branch, among the actor community, etc., etc. However, one has to bear in mind that still the whole actor community is also changing. So I think it needs time before certain things are discussed and put up broadly. And it is painstaking. Let me refer to the discussion we had among representatives of different art schools in Poland, with the international audience of the lectures from the schools abroad across Europe, organized around the umbrella initiative Change Now. And at certain moments, a plenipotentiary of the Krakow art school realized that he was actually articulating his experience that was very much determined by violence, right? He was on one hand contextualizing the procedures and argumenting for not creating too stiff system of reporting violence, etc., etc. But on the other hand, moderator just provoked him to refer to his own personal experience that was very much into violence. He, at certain moment, he referred to his childhood, etc., etc. So this means that these discussions can be difficult for the whole community. Now, the sociologist role in this is different than the role of moderator. So we are not taking actively role in the discussions as organizers of discussions. We are rather those who are referring to the research when asked about certain phenomena. Are they common or not? Are they somehow referring to the experiences of students that you work with or not? But basically, I think the weight of the process is much more within the community and people who are helping the community to communicate about it.
The well national has it back. The hand is all about the ending. So it's and then not just has an I had steaming that there is a because or the thought is English for the senior and that it would wear the Roman as they do or into Julia Banani. The thing mingling into line of names and research to already window or Palestine or column sorry working choosing these all in me that fine. And now it's on and good. No back. And now the mom control.
Raz.
And it's just so she mentioned it written.
Again. Okay.
For the video, I'm sorry, but the research published in English is available, of course, on the research project website, to which you can easily find the link on stoptrik.com.
Thank you. You were mentioning workshops for students and lecturers that are being conducted. What kind of workshops are that? I would be interested. And you were speaking about the different role of the sociologist and moderator. So who are the moderators? Are they psychologists or, what are their profession? Thank you.
There are two kinds of workshops. One are specifically about intimacy. So the work with intimacy, that's for performative art, probably something special and something quite exclusive for performative arts. But the other workshops are on feedback and on contracting. So the way because one of the biggest challenges is how to transform critique in the arts from this asymmetrical situation when you're a lecturer and you expect students towards the case when you're critiquing, giving a feedback, and in this feedback, negative and positive feedback is somehow together, right? So, and I didn't manage to speak about it, but basically for the lecturers, they are giving enough feedback. So from their perspective, the rules are clear and the feedback is there. From the students' perspective, the rules are not taken, and it is not only subjective. We asked about whether the students are given the written expectancies at the beginning of the syllabus with the clear criteria for evaluation, whether they are given the descriptive evaluation at the end, etc., etc. So we know that the sense of thoroughness among lecturers is not reflecting the expectations of students.
But they just no, but she.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a mostly clarificatory question. You mentioned obviously that at some point the personal frustration of lecturers can lead them somehow to aggression. And I was wondering how you seal that statement so it's not going to be a ready-made excuse for the lecturers. So my personal problems made me, do this, do that.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the same finding that you found here, that personal issues somehow, tend to influence either forms of discrimination or abuse. How can you let not this be used as a kind of excuse by perpetrators? So are there any other issues that we should know beforehand? Because, we all get some personal issues but we don't all abuse.
I think two things are important. First for me was very hard to understand because I know the Stanislavian methods in which basically if you perform, you should somehow identify yourself with who you perform, right? And where I couldn't get to what extent when people are making tasks should not refer to their own personal experiences. And I was like, well, this is quite obvious that in, let's say, Stanislavian method, the students are expected to refer to their personal experiences and their personal emotions, right? And then I was corrected. I was actually speaking about it with lecturers, and they corrected me. No, it's not the same thing. I mean, you can refer to your own personal feelings, but it can happen in your own head. It can happen if you decide to articulate it. But lecturers should not refer to it when he wants to reach certain experience, right? So he or she shouldn't ask about the moment you experience the dead body, right? It's something that is different. However, there is a discussion among lecturers what's permissible, what's not. In terms of frustration, I think among the lecturers, two things are important: the way they were socialized to their experience, to their profession. So it's very often the lecturers were saying, were answering the question, why should I do it? This is because it's hard, and this is what I did, what I got through, right? So there's like a reference to historic history that justifies the breaching of the borders, right? So you need to go through this hard experience because it's hard in its nature. I had the same feeling. I went through it, and this is the way it is, right? So this is something that for some lecturers means you have to do it in order to establish your own assertiveness, your own borders. After such a strenuous behavior, you know where's the border, your personal border, and then you can oppose the lectures, and only for some it is inadmissible in general. Did I address your question?
We can talk later.
Okay.
Yes, we'll definitely keep talking later on, for the subject is not disappearing. I'm so grateful that you guided us through those concerns that, as you say, every institution, every organization knows they are here. And now we need this. Now we need to negotiate for the language in which we will be talking about it, with understanding and respect and empathy on both sides of the conversation. And the understanding of the mobbing, the discrimination situations as paternalization situations, as conglomerate of situations and occurrences. I think this is also one of the most important takes we can take out from this room. And we need this discussion. This discussion is happening. Do we like it or not? And I hope that we'll use your research now as a tool that helps us. And Michał, performed? No? Well, thank you for being here. Thank you, Mikołaj.
Thank you very much for this session.
Thank you for this, and yeah, let's keep having festival now.